FigFab presents Building My RP3D Dark Elf 3D Printer. This part's about building the X, Y, and Z axes. I have an important update about my series of videos. Because the product was so new, RP3D hadn't finished marketing it yet. Last week I discovered that they have now finished the marketing and put it on their website. It's now called the Dark Elf printer, and you can find it at www.rp3d.com. So let's start building this. After building the frame, lay all of the remaining parts out. There are little tricks to sort them into the left and right parts of the y-axes. One way is to find the corresponding bolt holes from the bearing mounts. It's a bit of a puzzle, but it's actually kind of fun. Let's take a look at the right side of the y-axis. Lay out these pieces. Kind of arrange them the way you think they'd go together. Utilize things like the hole cut on the brass nut for the lead screw to orientate the top of the piece. This is the back piece, and you can tell because the bearing mounts match it. Roughly assemble the pieces just to make sure everything is right before you start bolting it together. Might take a bit of jiggling to get parts to fit, but they will fit. Once you're sure we have all the pieces of the right side, you can start to bolt it together. Now to put it together exactly the same way you put the frame together. Use a 3/4 inch bolt and the square nut and a washer and a lock washer if you need it. Now there's a clip coming up here that shows how sometimes when you bolt something together, it's hard to get another piece in. So a little trick is to just loosen up the bolts a bit. Here it is. It wouldn't go. So I loosened up the bolt and popped it in place. There it goes, and then I just tighten it back up again. Just a little trick. That looks good. Now let's take a look at the left side, the motor mount side. As we did with the right side, lay everything out and try and orient it properly. Put everything together without the bolts just to make sure you have all the pieces. That looks good. You can start bolting it together now. Again, use the 3/4 inch bolts and the square nuts. When mounting the motor, use the same size bolts as we used in the previous video. They're a bit shorter. Let's put it in place and see how it looks. That's pretty good. Now, after we built the left and right side of the y-axes, these are the pieces that remained. Now, I know that the big squares go on top to stop the Z-axes from popping through the top, the smooth rods from going through the top, and respectively the little squares go on the front to stop the X-axis smooth rods from popping through, but I didn't know what this piece was or where it went. Now I think it goes on the extruder, but I couldn't find any holes for it, but we'll just leave it aside for now. This part was a little hard to figure out till I looked at the picture. Now, that's what you attach the end stop to for your homing position on your Z-axis. And it's adjustable. That's why the slots. There wasn't quite enough room for washers on the bolts that hold the brass nut for the lead screw, so I left it out. When it came time to mount the bearings, I had a little problem because I had 2 different size screws left over. Luckily they both fit, so I just used 2 on each mount. Now use your needle nose pliers to hold the round nuts this time, not the square ones, to tighten everything up. Carefully push the smooth rods through the bearing mounts. Don't jam or force it, just keep twisting it, it'll go through. And do the same for the other side. It's really coming together now. Now, this part you don't actually have to do. I just like to make sure everything's fitting together properly to avoid any mistakes in the end. But these will have to be removed later on to put on the extruder. Now let's attach the torque couplers for the lead screws. Make sure the top of the motor shaft is about halfway through the coupler and tighten it up. Remember, there's 2 tightening bolts on these. Twist down the lead screw till it meets the top of the motor shaft. Then tighten everything up. Let's put on the heated bed assembly. I like to make sure that the thermistor wires come out the back. Just pull out the smooth rods and gently push them through the bearing mounts. Again, don't force them, they'll go. If you force them, you run the chance of knocking out some of the bearings. There's end stops at the back for the smooth rods, but not at the front, so we can assemble it. Great! Now let's put on the end stops. Again, use the round nuts, not the square ones, when you're going completely through the frame. And use the needle nose pliers to get a grip. Super! It's really coming together now. Just have one more once over to make sure you didn't miss anything. Stay tuned for my next video, which is going to be assembling the belts and the extruder head.